All right, news break right on top. U.S. Vice President and his wife, Usha Vance, J.D. Vance, to visit India. J.D. Vance on India and Italy visit from April 18th to 24th. The second lady of the U.S., Usha Vance, to accompany the United States Vice President. The U.S. Vice President will hold meetings with Prime Minister Modi, J.D. Vance and family to visit Delhi, Jaipur and Agra. This, viewers, largely is a personal visit. Let's cut across right now to my colleague Geeta Mohan, our External Affairs Editor, joining us live. Geeta, what largely is now a personal visit? What could be the official takeaway from it?
Well, there is a bilateral meeting between Vice President Vance and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This could encompass all issues that are to do with India-US ties, particularly right now, Preeti, the fact that there's a lot of conversation on regarding tariffs that could come up during talks, but it is not going to be specific to any one issue, given that there are concerned departments that are working on ensuring an early BTA, a bilateral trade agreement between India and the United States of America. Having said that, they are looking at how to take forward the trust initiative between India and the US, and that certainly is going to be part of the conversations and announcements when the two leaders meet. But it certainly is a private visit. Usha Vance and J.D. Vance, along with the three kids, are going to be in Delhi, Jaipur, Agra. So a lot of personal visit. Expect a lot of photo opportunities. The kids always go viral. So that certainly is going to happen during the visit in India. But 21st is the day when you'll have some official level talks between the two sides, between Prime Minister Modi and Vice President Vance.
Geeta, so there is a bilateral, so in all probability one of the biggest issues staring us in the face is trade. That will be on the table for talks, but a largely personal visit starting the 18th, which is not very far off. Where does the Vice President and his wife Usha Vance and the India Connect there wish to travel?
Well, they are going to travel to three cities that we know of: Delhi, Jaipur and Agra. She has a massive India Connect, but it's connected to Hyderabad. We do not really know whether if she's going to be in Hyderabad or connect with the family there. Most probably what we're given to understand is that her family members could travel to Delhi to meet with her and the family and the kids. But that's certainly, again, all under wraps for security reasons. We've been asking details of what really happens and how is the trip going to pan out in Jaipur and Agra as well. Again, mostly under wraps for security reasons. But we will have details on logistics so that we can plan coverage accordingly. This is going to be a very important visit for when it comes to the United States of America, one of the highest level visits between India and the US. Mike Waltz was also supposed to be here around the same date, the National Security Advisor of the United States of America, Preeti, but he's cancelled or rescheduling his visit. For now, this certainly remains the highest level visit from the US, and we'll have to wait and see. Even the bilateral between him and Prime Minister Modi is not a structured bilateral. It's just a meeting between the two leaders, given that he's going to be in India, and Prime Minister Modi will be traveling out to Saudi Arabia immediately after. So the window for them to meet is only on the 21st.
All right, only the 21st there, where in all probabilities there will be a bilateral where the Prime Minister Narendra Modi would be meeting with the Vice President of the United States of America. Appreciate you joining us, Geeta, on that. We're going to come back to you for more. Let's stick with the news coming in from America. And a massive face-off is building. President Trump versus the Howard University. Well, that battle has only but escalated. President Trump has said Howard hiring radicals, left, and yes, using the word idiots and bird brains. Moreover, suggesting Howard should not get federal funds. $2 billion federal grants to Howard have been frozen. Howard refuses to bow to Trump diktat. Trump admin wants more say in university affairs, and Howard has dug in its feet, saying absolutely not. All right, so this...
The US president is relentless in his attacks on Harvard University. The latest social media jibe comes in the wake of his threat to strip Harvard of its tax-exempt status on 15th April. because on Monday, Harvard University rejected what it called unlawful demands to overhaul academic programs or lose federal grants.
First, when it comes to Harvard, as I said, the president has been quite clear they must follow federal law. He also wants to see Harvard apologize, and Harvard should apologize for the egregious anti-Semitism that took place on their college campus against Jewish American students. There were professors who said that he had engaged in discriminatory behavior against Jewish students. Of course, you had the former president of the university saying bullying and harassment depends on the context. You also had an encampment on Harvard Yard that we all saw play out before the cameras. The university failed to impose formal discipline on any students for this anti-Semitic conduct violations, including the occupation of a campus building and the disruption of classes with bullhorns.
Beginning with Columbia University, the Trump administration has rebuked universities across the country over their handling of the pro-Palestinian student protest movement that roiled campuses last year, following the 2023 Hamas-led attack inside Israel and the subsequent Israeli attacks on Gaza. Students across different campuses protested, especially so in the Harvard University. Donald Trump has called the protests anti-American and anti-Semitic. He accused universities of peddling Marxism and radical left ideology. Through his presidential campaign and after assuming office, he promised to end federal grants and contracts to universities that do not agree to his administration's demands. Columbia, a private school in New York City, agreed to negotiations over demands to tighten its protest rules after the Trump administration said it had terminated mainly medical and scientific grants worth $400 million. But Harvard University did not buckle down. In an ex-post on Monday, Harvard University stated the university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. White House had said that the policy changes were designed to combat anti-Semitism on the campus. Harvard University President Alan Garber, in a letter to Harvard community on Friday, had stated that the sweeping demands violated the university's First Amendment rights, exceeds the statutory limits of the government's authority under Title VI. Former US President Obama took to social media to applaud his alma mater, Harvard University, for rejecting Trump's demands, and he said this sets an example. A few of Harvard's peer institutions lent support on Tuesday to the school's stand against the Trump administration, including Princeton and Stanford University. Bureau Report, India Today.
All right, let's cut across to the nerve center of it all, Howard University. And joining us from Howard is Rajdeep Sardesai, our consulting editor, who finds himself there this week. Rajdeep, at a time, beautiful blue skies behind you. What's the mood like in Howard? It's a time where President Trump, a short while ago, has called out Howard, where he says they are woke, bird brains, idiots, and they need to apologize. Most Ivy Leagues have caved in, like Columbia, but Howard seems to be standing up to Trump.
That's right, Preeti. It's been a rather dramatic 48 hours. And clearly, first of all, good morning here from Harvard. It's been a rather dramatic 48 hours that the same Harvard University, which just a few days ago appeared also willing to negotiate with the Trump administration, is now holding very firm. The letter which its President Alan Garber sent to the Trump administration made it clear that they would not tolerate any interference in academic freedom. Remember, this is a university with an endowment of as much as $50 billion. So it has the financial muscle to perhaps take on the Trump administration, to perhaps go in for a lawsuit. And remember the quality of its alumnus, not just in this country, but across the world. This is seen as the true gold standard in that sense of global academia. And Harvard symbolized for decades and centuries American soft power when it came to academic excellence. So Harvard comes from a position of strength. The President of the United States has today reiterated that Harvard would lose its tax exemption status, but there are others, certainly in the university, who I've spoken to, who believe that they are on legally strong grounds, that the president cannot withdraw the tax exemption. That can only be done through an inquiry which is independent of what the president does. So Harvard, in a sense, comes to this battle now with a sense of muscle that perhaps other universities don't have. What is interesting is when I speak to many of the academics here, they believe that now that Harvard has chosen to take on the bully, as they call President Trump, other universities may also be encouraged to join hands with Harvard. That hasn't fully happened yet, but we are hearing murmurs from Princeton, Stanford, other universities who are also now not willing to allow the administration of Donald Trump to enter campuses. And this is going to therefore be a classic face-off because Trump isn't backing down either. Trump, from the very beginning, Preeti, even during his campaign, said he was going to take on what he describes as elite woke institutions and get them to fall in line. So this is the classic battle of Trump 2.0, a populist right-wing administration taking on what the Trump administration believes is the heart of left-wing, liberal, old elite America. And it's fascinating to be here. I am not here technically to report this story. I'm here for a symposium on South Asian media. But just to be here and speak to academics is very energizing because unlike in India, the academic freedom that is guaranteed under the First Amendment gives a certain confidence to universities like Harvard that they can take on the political establishment.
But, Rajdeep, you say, and you're correct, that Harvard has this massive financial muscle in terms of endowments, but Harvard is also known for scholarships, international students. All of that will take a huge hit if Harvard continues to dig in its heels.
Well, we will have to wait and see how Harvard deals with any kind of financial strain that it suffers. Remember, the tax exemption comes to just over $2.8 billion. That's a fraction of the endowments that Harvard has. I don't see Harvard pulling back at this moment when it comes to scholarships, when it comes to fellowships. Look, there is concern on the campus. There is concern and fear that if you speak out against the administration, could a student lose his or her visa? Those are legitimate concerns that are there on the ground. But I think in terms of Harvard wanting to retain its preeminent status amidst global academia and global universities, I think Harvard has realized that if it can now look President Trump in the eye and win this battle, it'll only raise the stature of the university further. Just a few weeks ago, when the president had accused Harvard of breeding anti-Semitism, of allowing the pro-Palestinian protests to take place, it appeared, as I said at the outset, that Harvard was willing to negotiate. They didn't want to get into a confrontation with the administration. The president, Alan Garber, is a academic of economics and medicine, seen to be relatively low profile, hardly the revolutionary type. A previous president, remember his predecessor, had to resign because of her views on certain contentious issues. So Harvard appeared to be wanting to play it safe, but something has changed. And I think what has changed is a lot of the alumni, both within the United States and outside, want Harvard to take on the Trump administration because they believe that if Harvard was to cave in, then it would be impossible for any other university in America to resist political interference in campuses. So I think Harvard is gearing up for a battle, and every indication is they've already got a legal team in place, which, if necessary, will take the Trump administration to court on this issue.
But, Rajdeep, what's the sense? Because, you're there, you're delivering a guest lecture, you're speaking to the faculty, you're speaking to the students there. Many would, I would reckon with at least what we're reading up here, many felt this was a long time coming. And you're right, in the offset, it did look that Harvard was looking to compromise. And they were not the only one, because you look at Columbia practically bent over backwards, did exactly what, the administration wanted. Is there hope that other Ivy Leagues will now come in?
Look, every Ivy League has distinctive problems. Columbia, yes, you're right, was the first to negotiate. They were under great strain, particularly for some of their research projects. But earlier I was also at Brown University speaking to academics there, and they too seem to be now enthused by what Harvard has done. Clearly, they want to build a coalition, if possible, of the Ivy Leagues. Whether that will happen in the end, we don't know. As of now, clearly Harvard has taken a leadership position. Look, this is America. And in America, the First Amendment does offer you considerable protection when it comes to free speech. This is America where, as I said, you've got universities with $53 billion endowments like Harvard, which generate on its own over $2 billion just in interest that Harvard can earn from that. And that gives that financial muscle, plus the fact that this is a university that has produced presidents, leaders across the globe, including many people who've been closely connected with Mr. Trump at the past. You know, you were mentioning J.D. Vance coming to India. One of the interesting aspects is J.D. Vance himself is a product of an Ivy League. He's a Yale graduate in law. Now, how many of his peers and contemporaries will agree with J.D. Vance on the issue? There is a battle in America for the soul of America. There are those outside the Ivy League who believe that the Ivy League are far too privileged, far too elitist, and maybe they will side with Donald Trump. That's the battle that Donald Trump
Right.
wants to wage. It's part of his campaign during the presidential elections as well. But I think Harvard, in a sense, because of its global stature, is in a position to take on Donald Trump like few other institutions can at the moment.
Well, you're right there, and that's a battle that's not just playing out where the universities and Ivy Leagues are concerned. It's playing out on the streets of the United States of America as well, where there's a clear split in the difference of opinion and the protests that we see. Appreciate you joining us. Rajdeep, have a wonderful trip. Blue skies behind you. Enjoy yourself, and we'll see you back in the studio next week. Thank you. All right. Let me cut across right now to Andrew Manuel Crespo, Morris Wasserstein Public Interest Professor of Law. He joins us. He is a professor at the Harvard Law School. Appreciate you taking the time off and joining us, Professor, especially at this time. First up, your comments on the current conflict between President Trump and your university, where President Trump has practically called out Harvard for being woke, bird brains, or even using the word like idiot.
This is a dire moment, not just for my university, but for higher education all across our country, and really for our country itself. We are seeing an attack on the oldest university in the United States, and it is an attack that is trying to change the way that we teach, the way that we research, who we hire, and an attack on our academic freedom and on our independence. This is an attack on one of the central institutions of a constitutional democracy. Our president has been attacking our press, our courts, our legal profession, and now our universities. And I think it's very critical that these institutions stand up for each other, stand up for themselves, and insist on protecting their constitutional rights, including their freedom of speech and their right to teach.
But Professor, well, many would see it as a brave move, but how are you going to deal with the cuts in federal grants, in tax? Where is the money coming from? Understandably, yes, Harvard has this huge endowment. Even then, how are you going to deal with the cuts?
I am proud to see our faculty and our administration standing up. It is a scary time. There is no institution in the world that can just blink at losing $9 billion, which is what the Trump administration has threatened. At the same time, there is no university in the world that is more well-known and that is wealthier than Harvard. So I think it was incumbent on us to take this stand. I think we had a moral obligation to do it, but we can't do this by ourselves. We're going to need support from every other university in the country. We're going to need support from people who understand that this is a threat to democracy around the world. This is a critical moment and a critical test for institutions that are part of the lifeblood of democracy in countries that hold themselves out as democratically governed.
Professor, you say, you will need support, but if you continue to remain isolated, standing up against the administration, then I would reckon Harvard will go into self-preservation mode. How much will it then impact foreign students, scholarship, all that, Harvard is known for?
The attack on our foreign students is one of the most devastating aspects of the way the Trump administration is trying to bend Harvard and other universities to its will. We have seen our foreign students arrested and taken into federal detention centers without any criminal charges. Some of these students have been held there for weeks. We saw that at Columbia. We've seen it at other universities across the country. We have seen hundreds of students have their visas revoked for things like writing an op-ed in their college newspaper. This is an all-out authoritarian tactic. When you grab people off the street because they wrote something in a newspaper that you didn't like and you put them in a detention center for weeks without criminal charges, that is as authoritarian of a move as you can see. It is dangerous, and it is really, really important that we fight back against that with everything that we have. That is one of the threats facing Harvard, and you're right, these are scary times. But it is important also that we realize that we have tools at our disposal. For one, all of these actions are illegal. They are unconstitutional. I am a law professor. I teach law at Harvard University. It violates the First Amendment of our Constitution to try to use the power of government to coerce people into either shutting up or saying what the government wants them to say. That's why our chapter of the American Association of University Professors went to court last Friday and filed a lawsuit on behalf of faculty members here at Harvard to try to get these funding cuts frozen. Weeks before that, our chapter went to court to try to get a court order to stop these unlawful and unconstitutional arrests of our foreign-born students. These are the types of efforts that it takes to push back, but courts alone are not enough. We need people. We need the American people to understand that our universities are a central part of our country and of our democracy. This is where critical research that benefits people across the globe, cures to diseases, important new medicines are discovered. This is where we understand our history and our democracy and the role that law plays in our country. This is where we study our literature and the literatures of the whole world. This is where we study arts and dance and find out all the things that make our life worth living and our human flourishing so central parts of our lives. You can't have a flourishing society without flourishing universities. And everyone in the country needs to realize that, and I hope that people around the world will see that attacks on universities are attacks on the lifeblood of what a country can be and what it is.
Well, the opinion on that is very divided in your country, Professor, today, and there is this new reality. And to take off from the question I asked you earlier, how are you going to deal with this new reality? Because there will be students who are, international students would be very worried today, where scholarships are concerned. Number two, because Harvard might have taken this very hard stand. But on the other hand, what about students who might fear their visa being revoked, if they fall in line with the stand that Harvard has taken? So it has deeper implications for students who are studying at your university.
It's a great question. I'm proud to see our university taking some steps to try to mitigate on the financial side of this. They issued new bonds and sort of taking on new debts to have the type of financial security to handle this. I'm also very proud to be at the law school at Harvard, where we have an initiative where a law professor here at Harvard Law School and a team of lawyers give representation to any of our foreign-born students who are facing immigration consequences and work in partnership with lawyers around the area to try to provide the type of legal protection that we are able to provide. All of that said, it is a scary time. The Trump administration has arrogated to itself, has tried to grant itself broad unilateral power to cancel visas and to punish foreign-born students. And I understand and realize how much our foreign-born students here are the most at threat right now and are very scared. I have conversations with students in my office all the time about the fears they have about whether something, a protest that they went to is going to cause them to face these consequences. And I think it's essential in these moments for all of us here to realize we need to take care of the members of our community who are facing these threats. Harvard has to continue putting the resources into providing legal representation to any of our affiliates, our faculty, our staff, our students who are facing immigration consequences because of these threats. And we need to continue communicating to the world. Harvard is a global university. We are a global institution. Large numbers of our members of our student body, our faculty, come from around the world, including from India. This is an essential question for the globe. Attacking Harvard when the Trump administration attacks Harvard, it is trying to shut the doors to a global university and trying to impede our ability to share knowledge across the world, to build a global institution of knowledge and knowledge sharing. This is an issue just as much impacting other countries as it's impacting ours.
Professor, what some call wokeism, what is clear is an attack on liberal thought in universities and Ivy Leagues across, not just your university. The likes of Columbia have caved in, bent over backwards. Other Ivy Leagues are also compromising. Harvard right now is seen as the only one standing up against the administration. Do you think you will get support? Do you think, that possibly this could spark a larger resistance movement, or do you find yourself isolated in all of this?
I certainly hope we'll see support. That's why our chapter took the initiative and took the lead and filed this first lawsuit, moving even faster than the leadership of our university to try to make clear we are not going to back down. We are not going to sit down. We're going to stand up for our constitutional rights. We're going to stand up for the core mission of higher education in the United States. And we hope and are already seeing that others will be joining us. Look, the lesson from Columbia is critical to learn. Columbia was the first to face this onslaught, and I feel for my colleagues at that school. It is terrifying to have the federal government come down and try and destroy your institution. Columbia acceded to the demands that the Trump administration made of them. It did not get its money back. Instead, the Trump administration came back and froze even more money. This is the critical lesson to learn when you are being attacked by a bully. If you do what the bully wants, he's just going to keep punching you in the face. You need to stand up, and you need to stand up together. That's why I'm already encouraged to see leaders of other universities. I was encouraged to see the leadership of our university, days after we filed our lawsuit, say that they were going to stand up and not cave to these demands. And in the aftermath of that, you have seen statements coming out from other university leaders, presidents of other universities, saying that they appreciate what Harvard's doing and that they too are going to defend their academic freedom, defend their missions. We're seeing our former president, Barack Obama, standing up and saying how critical to the whole country higher education is and how we cannot let these attacks stand. I am hopeful we are seeing a turning point from fear to moral courage, from isolation to solidarity, and from all of us trying to realize this is the moment where we need to stand up. This is the moment we need to stand together.
Professor, let me put it this way. For a lot of, or let me put it this way. Who you called a bully right now is also the popularly elected president of your country. And I'm quoting what he says. He doesn't just want you to apologize, he wants accountability for the money that the federal government has been giving you.
Look, if the president actually thought that there were legitimate legal grounds to take this money away from Harvard, he would invoke the statutes that govern the process by which these funds could be rescinded. We have a statute passed by our Congress. It's called the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Title VI of that statute spells out all of the processes and procedures that are available to the president if he wants to try to remove funding from an institution like Harvard. To do that, he has to actually make an allegation about what we have done wrong, and then he needs to have a hearing and demonstrate it. He needs to put forward evidence. He has done none of that. The reason he has done none of that is because he does not have grounds to do it. That's why we've gone to court and insisted that this is not power that the president has. Our Congress, under our Constitution, has the power to appropriate funds and to put money where it wants that money put. For close to 70 years now, that Congress has put a lot of money into a partnership with the leading research universities in our country to ensure that scientific and medical advances can happen. The president is not using the statutes that are available to him to try to actually take this funding away because he knows he has no legal basis to do it.
But Professor, just this morning, the president's come out with a very harsh statement where he said Harvard has been hiring almost all woke, radical left idiots, bird brains, who are only capable of teaching failure to students and so-called future leaders. Harvard is a joke, teachers hate, stupidity, and should no longer receive federal funds. Now, do you also see what is happening, in a division in your society? Because at one end, a lot of protests are taking place, not just in universities, but across your country. But on the other, there are a lot who believe that, institutions like Harvard are elitist and only inspire wokeism.
I'm hopeful that we can find a way through where the president recognizes the value that these universities bring to the country. Look, I think for all of the things that we disagree on, I think that President Trump wants to see America succeed in the world. You cannot succeed in the world if you try to destroy your leading universities. Harvard and the other universities that have been targeted by the administration have been critical to America's success over the past century and more. This is a university that has been here since before the founding of this country. We have contributed to our scientific advances. We've contributed to our medical advances. We've contributed to our learning. We've contributed to our governance. We've contributed to the arts. You cannot have a flourishing society if you try and eradicate all of its institutions of higher learning. Is there a divide? Yes, absolutely. There's a deep divide in our country. Do our universities need to do better about trying to reach across that divide? Yes, absolutely. Do we need to make our universities more accessible to people across the country? Yes, absolutely. There is no perfect institution, but you don't improve these institutions by destroying them, and that is what the president is trying to do.
Professor Crespo, appreciate you taking the time off and joining us this evening. Thank you for that, and good luck. We in India would be keenly watching what really goes on. Good luck once again. Thank you for taking the time.